Boom! Longhorns grab a big one. And when I say big, I'm talking 6'7", 6'8", 350, 360-pound, big-time offensive lineman, national recruit, Nick Brooks. Jerry, he's in Grayson, Georgia now, but by way of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, over a host of national suitors, USC, Georgia, et cetera, et cetera. Nick Brooks picks the Longhorns. This is one that Kyle Flood sought out from the very get-go, stayed with him, and is yet another large human for Kyle Flood and the Texas Longhorn offensive line.
Yeah, big recruiting win for Texas. I mean, look, he is finishing up high school at Grayson, and a little timeline there. He was in Cedar Rapids freshman year, Alpharetta north of Atlanta sophomore year, back to Cedar Rapids junior year, and then he's finishing up as a senior at Grayson High, one of the powerhouse schools in the Atlanta area, east of Atlanta, out headed towards Gainesville, in those area of Georgia. Look, 6'7". CJ Vogel, I saw him on the official visit at the Austin Bergstrom Airport, and 6'7" and 370-ish is probably a legitimate number for him. But look, he is a guy that Texas, Georgia, USC battled till the end on. I mean, he doesn't need a helmet to knock people to the ground, by the way. So, look, this is a big national win because let's just say this. Even though he's finishing high school football in Atlanta, he is from Iowa. How many players has Texas ever signed from the state of Iowa? Anybody from Cedar Rapids? I can't recall one. And when Kyle Flood made a trip there in January, that kind of raised my eyebrows. I was like, whoa, okay, now hold on. That's a full day out recruiting spent to go see one kid. That tells you how much Texas liked him, one, and two, that they thought they had a real shot at him. And that shot came home today with Brooks picking Texas over Georgia and USC. And it's an interesting recruitment again because Georgia was considered a heavy leader for him. Texas got him on campus for the spring game. They get him back for the June official visit. He was with his mother and sibling on that official visit. And I think Texas turned the tide there. And look, Georgia has 4 offensive linemen committed. Texas had 4 when Nick Brooks made his decision. So it's not anything that has to do with numbers on either side. But this is a guy who could play some tackle, maybe right tackle, or he could play guard. He could be a devastating guard. Or if he gets that frame where Texas wants it, I think he's got the feet and the length to play some tackle for Texas. So I think it's really up to him and how hard he works. But, Bobby, he is really powerful guy.
Well, you look at him, Jerry, and I tell you right now, you see the transformation in season here.
Right.
The first couple of games, he looks like, oh, man, can he really play tackle? And then he starts losing a little weight, getting his foot quickness down, and all of a sudden you're saying, man, he might be able to play tackle.
Right.
And either way, though, what carries no matter what is the fact of how powerful he is.
Yes.
He's clearly a huge human that is very, very powerful at the point of attack and will have the ability to do wherever he ends up, be a factor, most likely from a positional standpoint. I really like him in the run blocking, but he showed some quick feet in the pass protection here. We're going to actually have Rod Babers here in a second step in and do a little bit of a video breakdown for him. Rod joining us with On Texas Football for these things. Jerry, what does this do for the Texas commitments at offensive line? Does this mean Texas now with 5, clearly 5 guys that, were A1 prospects for the Longhorns and Kyle Flood from the get-go?
Yeah, and they're all large humans. I mean, let's go down this. Nick Brooks is 6'7", 370. John Mills is 6'6", 330. Jordan Coleman is 6'5" and a quarter, 350. Devin Coleman is 6'4", 325. Jackson Christian, the runt of the litter, 6'5", 320. So they all have SEC size, SEC frames, large humans, big humans, whatever Sark and Kyle Flood tweet out when they get one. But I do think what it does is it solidifies the offensive line class for Texas with 5 really solid players. And there's always a shot Texas takes 6 offensive linemen in this class. We'll see what happens down the road as this thing gets closer to December. But Nick Brooks he fits the profile that Texas has been recruiting on the offensive line. They want big humans, large humans. They want to be able to lean on people. They want to have size. They want to have more size than you have size. And this class is another one that's built like that, coming off a 3-man offensive line class, which didn't have quite as many big frames in it. I mean, Nate Kibble is a 6'3", 310-pound guard. Daniel Cruz, a 6'2.5", 6'3", 300-pound center. And in Brandon Baker, not the overwhelmingly large human. He's 6'4.5", 6'5", about 315 right now. So this class, even bigger guys, and they have some tremendous interior prospects in this class.
All right, next piece for you as it relates to this. Texas getting into Georgia here a little bit. You know, we've talked about that being a state that Texas wants to recruit. They recently offered a couple of defensive linemen from the state as well to Shard Choice, originally from the state of Georgia. You think this means anything in that regard for Texas? I mean, Grayson is a big-time program. Amari Winston's committed from the state of Georgia this year as well. Is this one of those things where, hey, now Texas might be starting to really make some hay, not only in Florida, where we've seen them sign Cedric Baxter, they hope to get Jamie French and Jarrett Gibson, those kind of guys. Is Georgia the next frontier in that regard?
It needs to be. There's just too many high-level players in the Atlanta metro area down and in South Georgia. That Savannah area is loaded right now, too, of Georgia. I told the story. I went to 2 regional sectional track meets, they call them, in Georgia this spring, and I was just blown away. The talent there, and I knew it was good doing this nationally for years, but it's even better than it ever has been. There's a reason why Kirby has the most talented roster in the country right now at Georgia. There's just so many big kids who can move in the state, but they have every position. But Kenny Baker, also from Georgia, his dad was a longtime head coach in the state of Georgia. Last year, and it started last year with Texas. When Texas played at Alabama, the state with the most recruits in the stands for that game was Georgia, because Nick Saban always fought. He recruited through the whistle in Georgia, but when Kirby went over there, it became tougher to get as many of those guys as you wanted. But now with Texas have not only moving to the SEC, not only beating Bama, but having Georgia on the schedule the next 2 years, a lot of Georgia kids are going to watch Texas play and take interest in Texas. So I think there's a longer window, but this 2-year window with the Shard Choice, Kenny Baker, and playing Georgia this year in Austin, next year between the hedges, these are some key times, a key couple of years here for Texas to actually really put more resources. I'm not talking NIL money. I'm talking time spent, resources, traveling to Georgia with your assistant coaches, nights in hotels, going to schools during the live periods. I think Texas has to try to really claw to get into the state these next 2 years, because again, they're going to have more eyes on them than maybe they ever will, because they're playing Georgia at the height of Kirby Smart era the next 2 years.
Nick Brooks is a recruit that raises the profile of the Texas class somewhat, right? Because he's a nationally regarded recruit, et cetera. It doesn't mean that he's worth more of this way or that way, but from a perception standpoint, this is a big win nationally for Texas, right?
Yeah, I think so. And especially considering he just moved back to the Atlanta area. Now, we always say Sark's got to recruit through the whistle to try to flip guys. Look, Georgia will probably try to get the kid on campus this year for a game, right? So the recruitment's not over, but I think it's a big national win because USC was the 3rd school on the list. I mean, so how many recruitments out of Iowa have come down to Texas, Georgia, and USC, even though the kid's now at Grayson? That tells you the upside he has as a prospect, the way the colleges look at him. And now that he's playing at Grayson, by the way, you mentioned the 2 new D-line offers by Texas recently in the Peach State. One of those kids committed to Florida, plays at Grayson. So Grayson's one of those teams that has a lot of talent. They have a lot of big, fast athletes at Grayson High. So it's a really good school to get into for the Horns.
Should have mentioned Isaiah Bond is also from Buford, Georgia as well.
Yes.
So doing all the work in Georgia. All right, Jerry, thank you for that information. We're going to give way here to Rod Babers, who has a film breakdown of the young man out of Grayson, Georgia, Nick Brooks, who is the most recent commitment to the University of Texas. But before we go, I got to say one thing for you, Nick Brooks. Nick Brooks, welcome.
Hey, what's up, folks? Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers here to talk to you about Nick Brooks, the offensive line prospect, originally from Iowa, now in Georgia. And that's one thing that just stands out about this young man. He is massive. He is gargantuan. You're talking about just a huge human being. That's what Sark's all about, big humans. This is the young man you want to be the first guy off the bus. He's that kind of player, right? Put him first guy off the bus. He will intimidate the hell out of the opposing team. 6'7", damn near 350, and a guy that big is not supposed to be able to move that well. Watch him. This is a guy that can get to the second level at 350. Actually has, I think, really impressive feet for a guy his size. There you'll see the drive. That's one of the things that stands out when you watch film on him. He's got a really good drive off of the football. In terms of a power gap blocker, I think that's where he excels. You know, Tom Herman used to have a saying, you know, football, in terms of line play, football is simply moving another human being against his will. This is the guy, Nick Brooks, that can move guys against their will. So I think he naturally is an elite, like, gap power scheme blocker already just because of his sheer size. Pad level, probably a little too high, but hell, if you're 6'7", coming out of high school, I think everybody who's that big is going to have higher pad level. I think his hands, I think he can stand to improve his hands, because every now and then you'll see him absorb a defender instead of, you know, punching a defender and use his hands, but that's all stuff you can work out. But all the natural raw material is there, ladies and gentlemen. He's a man handler in the run game. Like I said, he can cave down the entire side of the defensive line, the defensive front on a down block. Like I said, his drive off the football, I think, is elite. You'll see him drive guys all the way into the secondary, all the way into the second level. I think that's where he really excels. I like the way he finishes block. I'm looking at an offensive lineman. I want to see him finish a block. Not enough to execute the block, not enough to maintain the block. You got to finish it. Right? You want to have the drive coming off the football, execute the block correctly, maintain it, but then finish that guy off. To me, that shows a certain tenacity. Shows me you got some of that nasty in you as an offensive lineman, and he's got a little bit of that nasty. I want to see a little bit more with him at 6'7", 345, but you can see that he wants to finish a block with emphasis, right? Finishing with attitude. That's important for your offensive lineman, because a lot of it is their attitude and mindset. I've seen them pancake defenders and finish plays. Shows me a little bit what I want to see. Zone blocking, which Texas has a healthy mix of zone concepts, probably more zone comps than man blocking concepts. So I think that's something that he probably would have to work on, but he's got the footwork for it. And he's got, you know, movement and mobility for a guy that can get to the second level, that can execute some of the zone blocking concepts and schemes. So I'm not worried about that. I don't think you see it a lot on film, because I really don't have to execute that on film, but there's no doubt when you see him get to the second level, when you see him on the move, you realize that is something pretty freaky for a guy that's 350 to be able to move in the manner in which he does. So I love that about his game. You see overall athleticism. You just don't see guys that size be able to move the manner in which he does. He's got SEC or Big Ten written all over him, that kind of lineman. These are the kind of guys that I think ultimately Kyle Flood loves, because these are guys who not only have elite size and elite height as well, the elite, wingspan and arm length, but then you also have some of the athleticism, and you all have some of those tangibles, those measurables that you need to see in terms of the athleticism and the footwork from this guy. So I think he's great. In terms of pass pro, I love his setup in pass pro. You'll see him anchor down, and that's when his footwork can really be shown up. But he has great balance for a big man when he is in pass protection. I think, ultimately he may have trouble with twists and stunts and being able to change direction for somebody that size. That is something I'd like to see. But in terms of his lateral movement shows you that if he does have to pick up twists and stunts in games by defensive linemen at a much higher level, of course, who can execute them proficiently, I think he's got, if coached correctly, I think he's got the skills, the footwork, the lateral quickness to be able to catch up with some of the twists and stunts. So there's really nothing he lacks for an offensive line prospect physically. I just think in terms of some of the fundamentals and the technique, like all young players, those are things that have to be refined and cultivated. But man, this guy is an ideal prospect for Kyle Flood and Sark about what they want to do. They want to basically impose their will, start with the pass, and lean on defenders, especially in the fourth quarter with those big humans. You just wear them out in the fourth quarter. This guy represents that, because if he leans on you for 3 or 4 quarters, by that fourth quarter, you ain't going to have much left. So there you go. That's my breakdown of Nick Brooks, the offensive tackle out of Georgia by way of Iowa.